everyone, this is Sarah from Miss Kelly Girl Sews. Welcome to my channel today. Today I'm going to do a little upcycle for you. I picked up a man's shirt in thrift last week. What I'm going to do is actually upcycle that into one of the tops of the moment, which is the Ghani tie front top. You can see it up here. So what we're going to do is actually upstyle the man's shirt and recut all the pieces and reassemble to make the really cool tie front summer top. The tutorial will include details on how to cut out all the pieces and then also how to obviously reassemble all the pieces. What you're going to need is a man's shirt, preferably cotton I would say, and a regular cut, not a slim cut, and also some bias binding for the ties and the neck facing. The video tutorial is a step-by-step guide on how to cut out the shirt as well as obviously reassemble it into your lovely tie front top. If you like the video, please click like below and also follow my channel. That enables me to make more videos of upcycling and also making new things. So this is the shirt that I'm going to be upcycling today. I picked this up in the second-hand shop of Animal Aid last week, as you may have seen on my videos. This is the Bowden size large 100% cotton shirt. 100% cotton is best because the polycotton doesn't fall quite right for the gathers on this shirt. So I suggest getting a cotton one if you can find it. Now I'm a size 14 and I've actually measured my pattern pieces on this shirt, which is a large. It's a straight cut shirt as well, not a fitted shirt. So you do need to be the old-fashioned straight cut shirt. And a large for a size UK 14 is about the right size. I think if you're bigger than a 14, you'd probably need an extra large. If you're smaller than a 14, you may get away with a medium. But I'd suggest, if you can, trying to pick up a shirt that's a minimum of a size large. What you're also going to need is some bias binding and a contrast for the ties, which I've done in navy blue. The reason I'm saying do a contrast for the ties is because if you don't, you're going to compromise the shape and size of the sleeve by cutting the ties out of the bottom of the sleeve. So what I'm going to say is cut the ties, which you'll need 6 of, out of the contrast fabric, and then also either cut some bias binding for the neck, which I've done here, or if you don't want to cut bias binding, just buy a small pack of bias that's actually either a contrast or a complementary colour to your shirt. Once you've gathered everything together, we're ready to start looking at the shirt and deconstructing it, and then we'll lay the pattern pieces onto the deconstructed shirt and start shaping it into the tie front top. So let's get started. This is my shirt laid out on my worktop. What I'm going to do now is actually deconstruct it. So we're going to cut up through the side seam there. We're going to cut up through this side seam here and then cut round on the outside of that seam allowance. So you're cutting into the sleeve and not the body. So cut round to cut both the sleeves off as well, and also just to cut the collar off. So just basically completely deconstructing the shirt. You've got your deconstructed shirt. What we need to do is put the shoulders in the middle and then basically fold it in half, because you're going to cut both of the front pieces and both of the back pieces. Let's start with the front. So just get your front pattern piece. Get the front pattern piece so you can see it just fits in to that size. Now what we need to do before we cut it out is actually have a look and see what we have left over here, because what we want to do is actually obviously make the frill out of this bottom piece of fabric. So now this is shaped slightly. So the maximum we're going to get is, for a size 14, is 7.5 inches, which is exactly what we need, but that's then going to be the same length. So what we need to look at is potentially using the sleeve and the bottom part of the sleeve to make the frill wider, because the bottom of the top is actually going to be probably about the width of the shirt. Now the frill obviously needs to be about a third bigger so that we can gather it slightly so it has nice ruffles on it. And I'd say a third to a half, 1 1/3 to 1 1/2 the length of the bottom of the front piece. So what we're going to have to do is when we cut the sleeves out, make sure we have at least 7 inches on the bottom there that we can actually use to lengthen the frill so that we've got an extra section in each side to actually make the frill, make it into a proper frill. So that should be enough. As you can see, my size is actually the middle one there. So what I'm going to do is cut it to the middle. So what I suggest you do is actually just mark it with some tailor's chalk if you're using a dark fabric, or if you're using light colour fabric, you could mark it with a water erasable fabric pen so that you know where you're going to be cutting it. Pin on the front one, so line it up with the shoulder seam on the shoulder there and that to the corner. And I'm going to pin this in place. This is my size. As you can see, a size 14 is pretty much this men's size large shirt. But obviously you will be darting that in a tiny bit at the bottom to give it a little bit of shape because I don't want it too boxy and square. What you need to do now is flip it round. Again, fold it in half. Right, so once you've flipped around the back, you've got your pattern piece on the front there. What you need to do is, where you've got the curve there on the bottom, just go straight across and mark it, and then measure up your 7.5 inches or however much you have on your front. So you know you need that to make the frill the same as the frill on the front. So I'm up to here, so basically I need to be putting my pattern piece at about 7.5 inches. So if I put that there, you can see it's very slightly too little there, but I'm not going to worry about that. What I'm going to do is not take the dart in quite so much on the bottom. But what you do need to do is look at where this comes, because this is now slightly below where that pleat is. So what I'm going to do is actually just cut the pleat so that it opens out like that, and then move the pattern piece over slightly. So there we have the back piece pretty much intact, just a tiny bit there, but we're not going to worry about that because I'll just make the dart slightly smaller. So then you need to pin on your back piece, knowing that you have 7.5 inches above that curve. So measure from there straight across and then up 7.5, and then you know that you have 7.5 inches for the frill on the back bit and 7.5 on the front bit, so that your frill is going to be 7.5 inches long. I haven't put a pattern piece in for the frill because obviously it will depend on your taste of how long you want your shirt, and also how long the actual shirt is that you're upcycling. So there we have both of the pattern pieces. We can go ahead and cut both of those out. That's your back piece. This is your front piece. That will be for your frill. Now we have the back piece and the front piece. The back is cut on a fold, and the front piece has the button band and the buttonholes, but we'll manoeuvre those, so don't worry about that. What we need to do now is focus on the frill. So we need to cut the frill as long as we can. So if we just line up these. My shirt's quite dark, so I'm actually going to turn it inside out and mark it on this side So I need to mark along this straight, cut off those seams, and then we're going to need to get it as long as we can. So let's make sure that this is square. 7, 7. And then take these take the back one and do the same. So it's the same size. Right, so then set those side pieces to one side at the moment. But as you can see, they're actually the same length, so we need to insert a section just to make these a little bit longer. But we're going to cut the sleeves first so that we can see what we've got left over once we've cut the sleeves. So get both the sleeve sections and then find the seam on your sleeve, and you're going to deconstruct your sleeve as well. So you just get your 2 sleeve sections and then don't bother to unpick it, just literally just cut down through the seam. Cut off the cuff and then do the same with the other one. Set the cuffs to one side, and then you need to have a look and see how much fabric then you have to actually make the sleeves. So what we need to do now is take your sleeve pattern and cut your sleeves. So this is a sleeve pattern that I've actually adapted from a puff top, because what I'm trying to do is actually obviously upcycle a shirt. So it's no way going to be the same as a puff sleeve, because if I show you what a puff sleeve really looks like, you'll see it's enormous. That's a normal puff sleeve pattern, and as you can see, this one's a lot narrower, because you're not going to get as much puff, not unless you insert sections in it somewhere. So we need to do the best we can with what we have. So what we need to do is just lay the pattern piece on the sleeve as best we can, and then literally just cut the head off the sleeve, because what you're going to do is actually gather that head a little bit, so it just makes it a bit of a better shape if it's not quite so tall. Right, so this is the length of the sleeve. Let's have a look, because we need 7 inches. That pretty much is 7 inches. I'm going to move it up very slightly so that it I'll make sure I have enough. So if we cut it slightly curved, you'll end up with a little bit more puff. So that's one sleeve. And we have enough on the bottom that we can cut that placket off there. Square these off, square that off. And then we have a section that we can put into the bottom frill. So do exactly the same with the other sleeve. So the pieces you'll have now are your 2 sleeves cut down, your extra bits for your frill, your original back and front frill, which will all need to be sewn together. You have a front 2 pieces and a back piece that's cut on the fold. What you will also need is a bias tape for the neck, which you can either buy bias tape or make bias tape. I've actually just cut one out of a plain navy blue. And you'll also need 6 ties, because if you've done the pattern the way I did it, as you can see, there's so little left over. There's so little of the fabric left over, you can't really make the ties and make it look as good. So I think get other fabric that's a pillowcase or something similar, and actually make your 6 ties, and your bias strip, which needs to be cut on 45 degrees so it is biased, so that it actually sits comfortably around the neck. So now we can start sewing. So what I'm going to do first of all is actually attach these shoulder seams. So if you take your back piece and open it out, right side facing you, and then you take your front pieces, and what you need to do is put these down on top, at the shoulders. So we're going to join 2 shoulder seams. So if you just pin along that shoulder seam, as you can see, I had a little bit of extra that was from the yoke at the top of the back, but don't worry about that, that just gives a little bit of substance to the shoulder. So again, do the same on the other side. Line those up. And before you sew it, what you need to do as well is put the darts in the bottom of the front and the bottom of the back. Take your pattern pieces. What I would do is put a pin through so I know where mine is, and also mark bottom of the dart with just a little notch on your size. So on the first front, just put your pattern piece on top, and we need to see where the pin was, which is there. What you do is just put a pin through. You can see where it is on the other side, and put that pin in there, and you can actually just cut on little tiny notches just in the front, so you know where they are. Same on the other one. And then obviously mark up the back sections as well. So once you've marked the placement of the darts, what you need to do is just join those 2 notches, line up the 2 notches there, pin at the top, and then pin down through. So that you just have a little bit of shaping in the front of the blouse, just so that it doesn't hang off your boobs. So again, the other side, so line up the 2 notches, pin where you've marked at the top of the dart, just line them up and pin both your darts pinned in the front. Do exactly the same with the darts on the back. And then when you sew the shoulder seams together, you can sew the darts in at the same time. So when I mark the bottom of the back dart, what I need to do is make it slightly smaller. So my size is that size, slightly smaller and slightly smaller in the top. Mark with a pin, same on the other side. So that's the darts back and front and the shoulders sewn up. What you can do now is actually stitch up both the side seams. Once you've done that, you take the frill and you need to attach all of these bits together. So I'm going to try to keep these front bits for the front so that I don't have to finish that edge. So then what you need to do is have the back section for the back. So take your two front sections, the back section at the back, and then a side on each side. So if we just pin all these together and then stitch them all together, we'll get one long frill with both the finished front edges as the openings. So make sure you've got your pattern up the right way if there's a directional pattern. Literally pin all of those together. Pin all those together like that. What you could do then is actually take your back and front sections. So once the side seams are sewn together, what you need to do is just measure the length. So I'm going to do this in centimetres because I work in centimetres. So just measure the length. So the bottom of mine is 107 centimetres. So I need to take this and gather this to 107 centimetres. So once you've attached the frill, it's starting to look a little bit more like what you're expecting. So there's the top with the frill on. So what we're going to do now is finish off the front and the neck. So we're ready now to attach the seam binding to the neck. So let's start with that first. So what you need to do is take your bias binding. Mine, I've actually ironed the fabric so that it's already like bias binding. And then you need to pin it all the way around the edge of the neck. Very, very carefully around the curve of both the front and the back. And then once you've pinned it on all the way around the neck, you're then going to stitch it around the neck very carefully. Make sure there's a little tiny bit of an overlap because you're going to actually finish this seam down. So what I'm going to do is actually turn over both of those front edges, that one to the edge of the buttonholes and that one to where the buttons were, because there is a seam allowance on there anyway. I've written that into the pattern, so you can just do that. But if you attach this first, then you can actually finish the binding. So sew the binding on first and then we'll finish the front. So I've now sewn the bias binding all the way around the edge of the neck, as you can see. What I'm going to do now is just clip with the scissors all the way around that curve, just to ease the binding in so that I can sew it down on the inside of the shirt. So if you just clip all the way around, just want to literally just cut through just so that it eases around that curve much easier. So to finish off the front, basically once you've clipped all the way around the neck, you need to then attach the binding. So what you want to do is obviously turn that seam under like that so that you lose the buttonholes. You can't see it when the completed garment is ready. So what you need to do is actually fold that binding over as well. So I'm actually going to do that from the inside. So what I'm going to do is actually just stitch down through the binding just to where the fold is. So literally over that buttonhole just down there, so then you can actually turn it in the other way and it's beautifully finished. So there you should be able to see, hopefully, what I've done. So that's the top corner of the garment. So I've literally sewn down through the buttonhole so that you don't see the buttonhole, and then on the back I've just caught in between the two folds on the binding so that you can still tuck that binding up, so that when you turn that through you can stitch it on the other side. So what I'm going to do is just cut this back to where I've sewn. So I've sewn along there and down there. I'm going to slightly take out the bulk there as well. And then what we need to do then is just turn that through so that the buttonhole is on the edge, and then we can just tuck the binding up there and actually then stitch the binding around and stitch the front down like that as well, so it's beautifully finished. So I've attached the binding now on the inside of the neck, as you can see. So that's all the way around with nothing showing on the outside. It does need pressing because it is just a little bit wrinkled at the moment. Once that's pressed, that will be fine. So that's the neck finished. Now I've only sewn down that much on the front at the moment. I've left the other bit open because what I want to do is actually put a modesty panel in on mine, because I don't want to have gaps down through here. So what I've done is taken the cuff, and what I'm going to do is make a panel that stretches from, so there's going to be 3 ties down through here, and it's what, 13 inches, so it's going to be at 6.5, so it's going to be about there. So if I just mark that, the centre tie is going to be there. What I want is a modesty panel just in between those two. So I'm going to take the cuff, I'm going to take the one that has the curved edge with the non-plain side, because I want it to just be the pattern of the fabric. I'm going to cut those buttons off, and then I'm going to sew this in here and finish off the bottom, just at the bottom of the frill. So the frill will be open and no modesty panel. The top will be open with no modesty panel, so you'll see skin through there, but then I'm just going to have a modesty panel there. You don't have to do this, but that's why I haven't sewn that down yet, because once I sew that down, I will sew the modesty panel in at the same time. So for those of you who want to make the modesty panel, if we take the front panel here, I've marked where the middle tie is going to go. So we want to go from the middle tie down to the top of the frill. So that's 7 inches. So I need to make a modesty panel that's 7 inches long. Now I'm going to cut those buttons off, but I'm going to use the top of that because it's got quite a nice curve on it. I'm going to cut the seam off this because that's quite heavy, like that. And then I need 7 inches. So if I cut it at 7.5 inches, what I can do is just do a little hem just at the bottom. I open that out, just unstitch that little bit of top stitching, just in there. So just take that little bit of top stitching out, fold that back round, and then make another lovely curve just on the bottom there by stitching that together, and then they'll be ready to be stitched in. So I've now cut the buttons off the top, and I've just curved the bottom edge to make this about 7 inches long. And what I'm going to do is actually stitch this into the front of the blouse. So I'm going to have it on the left side. What I want to do then is actually pin that over, pin the modesty panel into the front of the shirt there, like that. So nobody will notice there except me, and I won't be flashing the skin. So just a little modesty panel just in the front, so that when those are together like that and tied, you'll just see a little bit of pattern there and you won't see my skin. So we're definitely getting there now. We've got the basis of the bodice, got the neck finished, which is beautiful. Got my little modesty panel, which you don't have to put in as optional. So we need to obviously attach the ties to the front there and the sleeves, the final bit. So let's have a look at the sleeves. So depending on how big you've cut your sleeves, obviously how big your sleeves were on your upcycle shirt, we need to just measure around this, the curve on the head of the sleeve, just so that we know how big it is. Right, so mine is 56 centimetres, and if we look at the sleeve hole, how big is that? Because we can then work out how much we need to gather, or how much we'll be able to gather, should I say, to make an effective sleeve. I haven't got much gathering in mine. Mine's 51, so literally I've got about 4 centimetres, 5 centimetres of gather. So it's only going to be a tiny, tiny little gather at the top there for me. So if we put that to the side, what we need to do is just stitch around probably about 15 centimetres, 6 inches or so of the sleeve head, just 2 rows, parallel rows of basting stitches. Tie off one end, so leave one end loose, and then what we need to do is gather in the sleeve by about 5 or 6 centimetres, dependent obviously on your measurements. Once we've done that, we can sew down the sides of the sleeves on both of them and then do a hem along the bottom. This is slightly curved, so be a bit careful with the hem along there, so that we can then put some elastic in the bottom of the curve. Because we've got a curve at the bottom, there should be a little bit more bulk in the sleeve, so don't worry too much about the gathers. As long as we've got a little bit of a hint of a gather, then it gives the idea that it is a slightly puffed sleeve. So I now have my pair of sleeves. I've actually done the seam along the underarm, and I've also hemmed along the bottom. Just do a little tiny bit of a puff, just so that there's a little bit of shape at the head of the sleeve. So let's set the sleeves in. So if you just line up the underarm seam on the bodice, so that's the bodice, with the underarm seam of the sleeve, and just pin those in place. Then what you need to do is ease that sleeve in all the way around the armhole, and obviously gather it to make sure it's the right size to fit in the armhole. And then once that's gathered at the top and fitted in, then stitch the sleeve in place. So I've managed to set one of the sleeves in. As you can see, it has got a little bit of gathering just at the head of the sleeve, but it's not actually massively puffy. That's just because my sleeves on my shirt weren't actually that big. So this is my top almost done. Literally I've just got to do the ties on it and then give it a good iron. So if we move this out of the way, these are my ties. What I've done is, this is the pattern piece. I've literally cut them and then I've ironed them in half. And what I'm going to do is actually, if you see the profile there, I'm going to fold one edge into the fold there and the other edge into the fold there, and then fold it in half. So they're actually going to be a quarter of the width of the original. And then I'm going to sew down both edges with a top stitch just to secure them. So let me go and do that on the machine with all 6 of these ties, and then we can attach the ties to the blouse. So I've made 6 ties, so there's 3 sets of 3. There's 3 on one side, 3 on the other side. I haven't finished the ends on these yet, but what you need to do is just finish the ends before you sew them on. So if you just fold it over once by about ½ centimetre, and then fold it over again by about 1 centimetre, and what you're going to do is stitch just down there, just to stop the end fraying and getting all tatty looking, and just gives it a bit more of a solid end when you're tying your bow. So just in case you didn't understand my instruction from the blue ties, because I know they're not easy to see, I've got the tie piece of pattern piece here. So what you need to do is fold it in half like that. Obviously your tie, not your pattern piece. So if you fold your tie in half like that and iron it so that it's in half, you then have a profile that's like that. And what you're going to do is actually fold that side into the middle like that, and then that side into the middle. So it's almost like a bias tape. So you have both the bits in the middle like that, and then you're going to fold that over, and then that's the new width of the tie. So the profile is like that. You're folding it in half and folding the ends either side in, and then you're going to stitch down that side and down that side with top stitching so that it's stitched both sides and it looks nice and neat. So I've tidied up all the ends of those by turning them over and just stitching them. It is quite fiddly, so if you don't want to be doing that because you're not confident to do it, what you could do instead is actually just tie the end in a little knot, so you've got knots at the end of all your ties. That will look just as cool. So this is the final bit now, just sewing on the ties. So what you need to do is get all the ties and place them so that the hem is facing uppermost on the end, if you've done hems on the end, and then you need to just line them up like that, and the bottom two as well, so that they're all facing out, because you're going to stitch them on like this and then you're going to fold them over and stitch them on again. So that they're all facing out, and don't have them right on the edge, have them in from that seam, because you're going to fold them back over on themselves anyway. And then measure halfway down. So mine is centre to centre is 33. So if I fold up 33 and a half, I get 17 and a half. So I need to put my other tie at 17 and a half. So make sure that the hem is facing uppermost. So 17 and a half is there. And 17 and a half is there. So have them about a centimetre or so in from the edge, and then just pin them in place. So once your ties are pinned onto your garment like that, what you're going to do is actually stitch about half a centimetre from the end of each tie. So stitch along each of the ties, and then once you've done that, you're then going to flip the tie back the way it should be, and then stitch a centimetre over the top. So basically you're capturing the raw edge inside the tie, and you've got a lovely little tag that makes a little bit of detail. So let's start by just stitching the half a centimetre from the end on each of these 6 ties, and then we'll come back and do the other line. Okay, so all the ties now are stitched on facing outwards. What we need to do now is basically flip that over so that it faces the middle, and then what you're going to do is actually just stitch about a centimetre from that folded edge. So basically what you're doing is capturing that little bit of fabric inside so there's no raw edges, and obviously the ties then are facing the middle, which is what you want. So there's your shirt finished now with the ties all complete. A lovely full frill bottom, and almost puffy sleeves, but not overly puffed. Hi everyone, thanks for watching my video. I hope you liked it. Please don't forget to click like below if you really did like it, and also click subscribe so that you can see when I upload more videos. This one is a great success. Obviously sustainability is the way forward in fashion, so I hope you'll join me on upcycling and working on lots of new projects in the future.